What's up, YouTube? It's Biblical Truther. I've made videos about this particular subject years ago, probably 4 years ago now. But it seems that everything is lining up for this to be what I have in the title of this video, the oil storm. There was a movie that was released on June 5th in 2020, well, just say 2005, easier said that way. 2 months before Katrina hit, 2.5 months before Katrina hit, and it was a low budget film. It didn't hit the blockbusters or nothing like that. Nobody really heard about it. There was no um, advertising about this movie. But if you were from the South and you was around New Orleans when Hurricane Katrina hit, which I was actually in prison at the time, but here in southern Louisiana, and but I seen the pictures, I seen the news coverage, I seen the helicopter footage of all the flooded city, basically where the levees broke and water had made it all the way downtown to Canal Street. Um, Heard some horror stories of some inmates that were down here at OPP, but I think this might be the real one. I don't remember if I covered the Wikipedia page for Oil Storm, but check this out. It says oil storm, and this didn't used to say this, but this is what it says now. Oil Storm is a 2005 television simulation portraying a future oil shortage crisis in the United States, precipitated by a hurricane destroying key parts of the United States oil infrastructure. The program was an attempt to depict what would happen if the highly oil-dependent country was suddenly faced with gasoline costing upwards of $7 to $8 a gallon, as opposed to the national average of around $2 per gallon when the show first aired. The crisis arises from a hurricane destroying an important pipeline at Port Fourchon in Louisiana, a tanker collision closing the busy port, terrorist attacks, and tension with Saudi Arabia over the oil trade, and other fictional events. The program followed the lives of several people, the owners of a mom-and-pop convenience store, paramedics, stock market and oil analysts, government officials, and others, and includes a substantial amount of human drama. Oh, it's far greater than that. So, used to, as I said just then, it didn't say that it was a simulation. But we know with Event 201 that they called that a tabletop simulation or exercise, right? So now they're saying that this movie was a simulation of what it would be like. But again, if you were down here in the South and know how the government response was made and what they did as far as martial law and kicking in doors, rounding up people, rounding up guns of people, all those things that they were doing that most everyone never got a gun back, that was seized by the government. But I don't think the military actually understood at the time, being the first disaster of that magnitude, what they were really doing and basically training for. But in this movie, it basically happens identical to Katrina. Um, I think they even kind of hinted at maybe the levees being blown up, but not just rupturing from the height of the water. But I think there were some people that they had interviewed, in the simulation of this fictitious um, movie that might have alluded to an explosion, which is exactly what happened in Katrina. Um, but I know some people that were down in that area, and it was most definitely an explosion. The levee don't just break with the sound of C4. But anyway, whether it happened or not, I didn't see it. I just know what people that I know personally that were down in that area heard, and it was definitely not just a rupture of the levee. But anyway, they basically lay out the entire Katrina scenario in this show, in this simulation movie. But what happens after that, when that severs the pipeline coming in from the Gulf at Port Fourchon, and we end up having to buy oil from Saudi Arabia at 1 million barrels a day. And it's funny because this hurricane is called Beryl. Um, I don't know if that's just a way they could laugh in our face because they know what they're fixing to do, perhaps. But it also is depicted in I Pet Goat 2 of a hurricane and then the oil drying up and all that type of thing. But another thing that's interesting is this, that there is a connection to Strong's Concordance, like they usually like to do. From June 5th, 2005 to July 5th, 2024 is 6,790 days, I think it is. So I looked it up in the Strongs and check this out. And here I'm using Bible Tools to get the Greek and Hebrew definition for Strong's 6970. And it says probably from 6972 in the original sense of cutting off, curtailment, the region of Bab. The cutting off. The cutting off. Is that coincidence, or could this be the next stage of the plan? Because all the digital currencies are set up, ready to go. The central bank currencies are ready to go digitally. The conflict in the Middle East has gotten to a point now where, as in the movie, what happened when we were buying oil from Saudi Arabia, there were some, I don't know what you would call them, rebels or whatever, who were mad that Saudi Arabia was helping America out. So they went and blew up some of the refineries and pipelines and basically shut down their oil production, or at least their way of getting it out of the country, shut that down. So then America was without oil, or not without, but didn't nearly have enough to sustain our slavehood over here. But it ultimately culminates in World War III. And if the world's economy crashes, if the petrodollar crashes, I know China and them, they got the BRICS with Russia and India and all them, but we're not a part of that, as I haven't heard whether or not we've signed up, and I don't believe we have, because that's kind of not the plan, right? So I took this little picture. If you don't know what I'm talking about, most people haven't even heard that there's a hurricane on the way, but it'll be here next week. Probably not on the 5th, but a few days after. But it could definitely speed up and be here a little earlier than they're forecasting. But check this out. It's kind of hard to see, but that's Beryl right there, that hurricane. You see how perfect the eye is, how tight the storm is, but to the right, there is another storm right behind this, and this is indicative of Katrina, as I said. When Katrina hit, there was another one that came in a week later that pushed even more water into the Gulf, which ultimately kept the flooding down here in New Orleans sustained for a while. So, yeah, man, keep an eye out. So as I stated just then, there was another thing similar to what's going on right now in this reality, that Katrina came through and destroyed New Orleans, right? But then another hurricane come through about a week later, real mild hurricane, and just had sustained winds that just pushed the water up into the Lake Pontchartrain and all up on land, and kind of kept the flooding around a little longer than it normally would have been had it not had another storm come in from behind it. But this being the case, that everything is in order for them to do something like this, and I'm not saying it's going to happen this way, but the forecast where this storm is supposed to hit is around Corpus Christi. All it would take is just a little shift to the east, and it's going to hit Port Fourchon. So even if this thing went in at Lake Charles, the right side of the storm, the most strongest side of the storm, would still affect Port Fourchon. And as they say in the movie, it wasn't technically the hurricane more so than it was a oil tanker that was tossed on land and basically compromised the pipeline. So a couple years ago when they had Hurricane Cristobal, I made a video about that. It was on my old channel that's still up. But I made a video about how they were trying to, basically turn America from Christ to Baal, or Baal, however you want to pronounce his name. And that was the whole point of the Cristobal, Christ to Baal hurricane. And ever since then, it's been just a pretty much downhill slide for America as far as economy, the overall just how people are in this country, man. It don't get more hateful and self-centered and selfish than the people are in this place now. I drive in New Orleans at work every single day, and man, there's no empathy or sympathy from probably 90% of the people you encounter. But it's crazy, crazy, crazy. But this would be a perfect time with the Middle East in turmoil. It would give rise to a rebel group to basically stop anybody over there from trying to help us with oil. They done shut the pipeline down up north. I mean, they couldn't set this up any better. And if this storm does come through at a category 5, 6, as it's being predicted, because if it's a 4, bordering a 5 right now in the Caribbean, it hasn't even hit the warm waters of the Gulf yet. So this very well could be our first borderline Cat 6 hurricane hitting, the Gulf South. And just that magnitude of a storm, because Katrina, they said, was like a 5, mid-5, I guess. This thing could very well be a high to Cat 6. And I'm going to tell you, I woke up this morning and on my phone was a heat advisory. It wasn't even daylight yet. It was probably still 2 hours before daylight. It was 4:10 when I woke up this morning. And I had an alert on my phone saying that today's humidity and heat was going to put the heat index around 111. And that's right here at the Mississippi Gulf Coast, Louisiana Gulf Coast. So my kids don't even want to swim in our swimming pool because the water's so hot. So just imagine how hot the Gulf is. When the Gulf already puts out warm water, that's where you get the Gulf Stream that goes all the way up to Greenland and Iceland and basically brings all the warm water to Europe, comes right here out of the Gulf. So there's already hot water pumping into the Gulf from inside the earth. So now you have the sun that's just beaming, just crazy hot. But feels like fire to me. I'm out here every day working in this stuff. So I'm just making this video to tell you guys that even if you're not on the Gulf Coast and you're inland, well far inland, you don't get affected by hurricanes and stuff, you may want to prepare as though it's going to hit your area. Because if this thing happens the way it happened in that movie, it could have been very well could have been a simulation for Katrina, but it very well could be a simulation for the future, because that's what Wiki says, right? So I just wanted to make this video, raise awareness to this hurricane, because most people in Central America, the Northeast, Northwest, out west, they don't too much care about hurricanes, but what if it was a hurricane that affected the whole country and nobody but the Gulf Coast prepared, or at least prepared for a short while? I think a lot of places down here were out, months without electricity. I know my mom and them, they were having helicopters bringing them MREs for weeks, dropping it off at their house. So I would advise, because at some point this whole system can't go on, and they're ready to transition. So that Strong's Concordance word meaning cut off could mean cut off of a lot of things, not just the oil. But if you believe that IPEC Goat 2 is a prophetic thing that they put out for people to decode, it very much does show the oil drying up right after a hurricane. So think about it, man. Even if you're not affected directly, I think it's very possible that the entire country could be affected indirectly, and shortly thereafter the entire world, because this, if it happens the way they ran this simulation and then turned out as a movie, then it's going to affect the whole world. It's not just going to be us. So just wanted to make this video for you guys, give you fair warning that this could possibly be it. Every little thing lines up. I pray it's not, but I make videos when I feel that they're important. So please prepare or do something, get ready, because it very well could be the last of this country. Love you guys.
And the results is Oil Storm the movie, a fiction docu-film, which it was never described as that. But then you have the movie Oil Storm, or something about that. But check this out. Boom. Beryl becomes a Cat 4, strongest hurricane on record in June. And then you get into some other stuff about oil rigs and stuff. So why is this under the search results for Oil Storm?
Stand therefore, having your loins girt about with truth, and having on the breastplate of righteousness, and your feet shod with the preparation of the gospel of peace. Above all, taking the shield of faith, wherewith ye shall be able to quench all the fiery darts of the wicked, and take the helmet of salvation, and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God, praying always with all prayer and supplication in the Spirit, and watching thereunto with all perseverance and supplication for all saints,